In 1882 Wyoming, a desperate rancher's wife invited a notorious outlaw into her home while her husband was supposedly away. What began as a deadly trap turned into something far more dangerous when she discovered the truth. Listen till the end. Before we dive into the story, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt trapped in a situation where the only way out was through a door you were terrified to open, this story will hit different. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories about people who dared to change their fate. Now let's continue with the story. Nora Calloway stood at the window of her cabin, watching dust rise from the valley floor below. A single rider moved through the sagebrush flats of Red Creek Valley, taking his time, like a man who knew exactly where he was going and wasn't afraid of what he'd find when he got there. Her hands trembled as she gripped the windowsill. She'd been expecting him. They both had. Silas Kane. The name her husband had spoken 3 nights ago, in a voice tight with something that might have been fear or excitement, or both. The outlaw Garrett claimed they owed money to, though Nora had never heard the name before that night. The man they were going to kill. Garrett had left yesterday morning, making a show of saddling his horse, loading supplies, telling her loud enough for anyone passing to hear that he was riding to Cheyenne with a cattle buyer and wouldn't be back for 3 days. He'd kissed her cheek at the door, his lips cold and dry, then whispered against her ear. "Remember the plan. Get him inside. Make him comfortable. I'll handle the rest." Then he'd ridden east toward the main road, circled back through the canyon wash where no one could see, and climbed into the loft through the back window. He was up there now. She could feel him watching, waiting, his rifle loaded and ready. The plan was simple. She would play the frightened wife, alone and vulnerable. She would invite Kane inside, offer him food, whiskey, whatever it took to make him lower his guard. And when the moment was right, when Kane's back was turned or his attention drifted, Garrett would put a bullet through his skull. They'd bury him in the hills, take whatever money he carried, and tell anyone who asked that he'd never arrived. It was murder, cold and calculated, but Garrett had convinced her they had no choice. "He's coming for what we owe him," Garrett had said, "and men like Kane don't negotiate. It's him or us." She'd asked what they owed. Garrett had been vague. Money from a land deal gone wrong. A debt from before they were married. The details shifted each time she pressed. Now, watching the rider approach, she wondered why she'd believed him at all. The man who emerged from the dust wasn't what she expected. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe early 30s. Tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting, and clothes that had seen hard miles. He sat, his horse with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent more time in a saddle than in a bed. When he dismounted in her yard, his movements were fluid and controlled. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Gray, clear, and far too intelligent for a man who was supposed to be a simple outlaw. He tied his horse to the post, looked directly at the window where she stood, and waited. Nora forced herself to move. She smoothed her dress, touched her hair, reminded herself she was supposed to be afraid. That part, at least, wouldn't require acting. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The afternoon sun was brutal and unforgiving. Kane studied her with an expression she couldn't read. "Mrs. Calloway." His voice was deeper than she expected, rougher. "You know who I am." "I know a lot of things." He glanced at the cabin, the barn, the empty corral. "Your husband home?" "He left yesterday. Won't be back for 3 days." The lie came easily. She'd practiced it. Kane's eyes returned to hers. For a moment, she had the terrible feeling he could see straight through her. "That's convenient." Her heart hammered. He's meeting a cattle buyer in Cheyenne. It's business. I'm sure it is. Kane took a step closer. Not threatening, but deliberate. Your husband owes me, Mrs. Calloway. I've come a long way to collect. I don't have anything. Whatever he owes you, I'm not here for money. The words hung between them like smoke. Nora felt the plan crumbling before it had even begun. This wasn't a man who could be seduced or distracted. This was someone who'd thought 3 steps ahead before he ever rode into her yard. She made herself breathe, made herself remember Garrett in the loft with his rifle. They still had the advantage. Kane didn't know he was walking into a trap. You must be tired, she said, letting her voice shake just enough. Hungry. I dare you to come inside. Let me at least offer you a meal before whatever you plan to do. Kane studied her for a long moment. She couldn't tell if he believed her fear or saw through it completely. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. All right, Mrs. Calloway. I'll come inside. He walked past her through the door, his hand never moving far from the gun at his hip. Nora caught a glimpse of movement in the loft window above. Garrett was watching. The trap was set. Nora moved to the stove while Kane settled into the chair at her table. He didn't sit carelessly. His back was to the wall, positioned so he could see both the front door and the window. The gun on his hip was within easy reach. She was acutely aware of Garrett above them, his presence like a weight pressing down through the ceiling. He'd be sighting down his rifle barrel right now, waiting for Kane to relax, to turn, to give him a clean shot. Her hands shook as she sliced bread. She needed Kane distracted, vulnerable, his guard down. That was her job. Garrett would handle the killing. How long you been married? Kane asked. The question caught her off guard. 3 years. Happy? She turned to look at him. His gray eyes were steady on her face, reading something she didn't want him to see. Of course. You're a terrible liar, Mrs. Calloway. Heat flushed her cheeks. She set the plate down harder than she intended. You don't know anything about me. I know you're afraid, but I don't think it's me you're scared of. She poured whiskey into a tin cup, her pulse hammering. This wasn't going according to plan. Kane was supposed to be a simple outlaw, greedy and stupid. But the man watching her now was neither of those things. She carried the cup to the table, leaning close as she set it down. Let her hand brush his shoulder. Testing. Kane didn't react, but something shifted in the space between them. The air felt heavier. You said my husband took something from you, she said, returning to the stove. What did he take? Something I can never get back. That's not an answer. No, it's not. He lifted the cup, drank, set it down with deliberate care. Tell me about your life before him. Why does that matter? Because I'm curious. She should lie. Should spin some story about a happy childhood and a love match. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. I was alone. My parents died of fever when I was 19. I had nothing. No money, no family. Garrett offered security. She paused. I didn't have other options. Security, Kane repeated, his voice flat. That what you call it? She turned sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Means I've seen the way you flinch when you talk about him. Means that bruise on your wrist is finger-shaped. His eyes were cold now, seeing too much. Means you married a man who doesn't treat you like a person. Nora's throat tightened. She pulled her sleeve down to cover the marks Garrett had left 2 days ago when she'd questioned the plan. You don't know anything, she whispered. I know more than you think. Kane stood, and for a moment she thought he was leaving. Instead, he crossed to the window, looking out at the empty yard. I know your husband's a coward. I know he sent you out here alone because he's too afraid to face me himself." Panic flared in her chest. Did Kane know? Had he figured out the trap? But he just stood there, his back to the room, to her, to Garrett's line of fire from the loft. This was the moment. This was what they'd planned. Nora's eyes flicked to the ceiling. Garrett would be aiming now. One shot. It would be over. Her mouth opened to call out, to distract Kane, to make sure he stayed perfectly still. But the words wouldn't come, because somewhere in the last hour, watching this man who saw her bruises and called them what they were, who spoke to her like she mattered, something had cracked open inside her chest. And she realized with dawning horror that she didn't want him to die. Night fell fast in the valley, and should have left an hour ago, but Nora had insisted it was too dangerous to ride in the dark. Wolves, she'd said. Bandits. The trail was treacherous without moonlight. All lies. She needed him here, in the house, where Garrett could finish this. But Kane refused the bed she offered. Said he'd sleep in the barn. "I'm afraid to be alone," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. It wasn't part of the plan, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Kane studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached out, his calloused fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "You're lying," he said quietly. "But I don't think you know why yet." He walked out before she could respond. The moment the door closed, Garrett dropped from the loft like a spider, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was a harsh whisper. "Building trust. Making him comfortable. You're stalling." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the old bruises. "I had a clear shot twice. You could have coughed, dropped something, anything to keep him still. But you just stood there. I didn't. You like him." The accusation hit like a slap. "I saw the way you looked at him." "That's insane. Is it?" His grip tightened. "Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you forgot whose side you're on." She wrenched her arm free. "I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. Getting him to trust me." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Finish it tomorrow. Get him in the house, distract him, and I'll put him down. Clean and simple." He leaned close, his breath hot against her face. "Or I'll do it messy and you'll help me bury what's left. Understand?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He climbed back to the loft, and Nora stood in the dark cabin, her arm throbbing where he'd grabbed her. She could still feel the ghost of Kane's fingers on her cheek, gentle where Garrett was always rough. She was losing her mind. Kane was a stranger, an outlaw, a man who'd come to collect some mysterious debt from her husband. She should be terrified of him. But Garrett's accusation kept echoing in her head, because it was true. She did like Kane, liked the way he'd seen her bruises and gotten angry on her behalf, liked how he spoke to her like she had a brain, liked that he'd refused to take advantage of her obvious attempts at seduction, and she was starting to suspect that whatever debt Garrett claimed they owed, it wasn't the truth. She grabbed her shawl and slipped out into the night. The barn loomed dark against the star-filled sky. She shouldn't go to him. This was madness. But her feet kept moving. She found Kane awake, sitting in the shadows with his gun across his lap. "Knew you'd come," he said. She sat down beside him in the hay, close enough to feel his warmth. "Tell me the truth. What did Garrett really take from you?" Kane was silent for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his voice came out of the darkness, low and raw. "My brother. His name was Daniel. He was 17 years old." The world tilted beneath her. "What?" "5 years ago, Daniel and I were working a claim near here. Your husband wanted the land. There was a confrontation." Kane's jaw tightened. They found Daniel with a bullet in his back. called it a hunting accident." Nora's blood turned to ice. She remembered that year, remembered Garrett coming home with new land, remembered him being strange and jumpy for months afterward. "You think Garrett killed him? I know he did. Took me 5 years to track down witnesses, bribe the right people, follow the trail to this valley." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting starlight. "I didn't come for money, Mrs. Calloway. I came for justice." She should scream, should run back to the cabin and warn Garrett. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Are you going to kill him?" "Yes." The word hung between them, simple and terrible. "Are you going to kill me too?" Kane's expression softened. "No, I think you're as much his victim as Daniel was." Something broke open in her chest. She'd spent 3 years convincing herself that Garrett's coldness was normal, that his rough hands were just how men loved. But sitting here with Kane, she understood what she'd been too afraid to admit. She'd married a monster. Kane reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was so gentle it made her throat ache. "Go inside," he said quietly, "before we both do something stupid." But Nora didn't move. "Tell me about Daniel." Kane's hand dropped. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he started talking, his voice rough with old grief. He was supposed to be in school back east, had a scholarship and everything. But our parents died, and there wasn't money anymore, so he came out here to help me. Kane stared at his hands. Kid was brilliant. Could have been a lawyer, a doctor, anything. Instead, he was breaking his back on a worthless claim because I was too proud to let it go. It wasn't worthless if Garrett wanted it. Wasn't the land he wanted. It was what was under it. Kane's jaw tightened. We'd found silver. Not much, but enough. Word got around. Your husband made an offer. Daniel told him no, said we'd work it ourselves. 2 days later, Daniel was dead. Nora felt sick. The hunting accident. Sheriff ruled it that way, but the bullet came from behind, low and angled up. Whoever shot him was on the ground while Daniel was on his horse. Kane's voice went cold. That's not how hunting accidents happen. Why didn't the sheriff investigate? Because Garrett paid him not to. He looked at her. Your husband's good at making problems disappear, Mrs. Calloway. You know that better than anyone. She did. She'd seen Garrett talk his way out of disputes with neighbors, watched him settle arguments with cash or threats. She'd just never let herself wonder how far he'd go. I've spent 5 years tracking him, Kane continued, following rumors, bribing witnesses, piecing together what really happened. Everyone was too scared to talk at first, but eventually, people get brave or desperate or drunk enough to tell the truth. And now you're here. Now I'm here. He studied her face. Did you know about Daniel? No. The word came out fierce. I swear I didn't. Garrett told me you were an outlaw he owed money to, said you'd kill us both if we didn't. She stopped, the truth catching in her throat. Didn't what? She couldn't say it. Couldn't admit she'd been planning to help murder him. But Kane's eyes saw everything. He set a trap. You were the bait. It wasn't a question. Nora's silence was answer enough. Where is he? Kane asked quietly. Your husband who's supposedly in Cheyenne. She should lie. Should protect Garrett. 3 years of marriage, of obedience, of swallowing her fear, demanded she stay loyal. But when she opened her mouth, the truth came out instead. In the loft. He's been there since yesterday, waiting for a clear shot at you. Kane didn't move, but something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, recognition. You knew, she whispered. Suspected. Your eyes kept going to the ceiling, and the dust on those stairs was fresh, like someone had climbed up recently. He stood slowly, his hand moving to his gun. "The question is, why are you telling me now?" Nora stood too, her heart hammering. "Because he murdered a 17-year-old boy, and I won't help him do it again." Above them, a floorboard creaked. Kane's eyes went to the loft, then back to her. "How fast can you run?" Before she could answer, Garrett's voice cut through the darkness. "Not fast enough." The rifle shot shattered the night. Kane slammed into Nora, driving them both behind a hay bale as the bullet punched through the barn wall where they'd been standing. Wood splintered. The horses screamed and kicked in their stalls. "Stay down," Kane hissed, his body covering hers. Another shot, closer this time. Garrett was moving, repositioning for a better angle. Kane rolled off her, drawing his gun in one smooth motion. "How many ways out of this barn?" "Two. The main door and the back where we stack hay." "Can you get to your horse?" "Not without crossing open ground." Kane swore under his breath. They were pinned. Garrett had the high ground and the advantage of knowing exactly where they were. "Nora," Garrett's voice echoed across the yard. "Come out here. Now." She didn't answer. "I know you're in there with him. I heard everything." A pause. "You betray me like this? After everything I've given you?" Kane's jaw tightened. He edged toward the barn door, trying to get a sight line on the cabin. "Last chance, Nora. Walk out now and I'll make this quick. Stay with him, and I'll make sure you both suffer." Kane glanced at her. "He's bluffing, trying to flush us out." But Nora knew Garrett better. "He's not bluffing. He'll burn us out if he has to." As if to prove her point, orange light flickered through the barn door. The smell of smoke drifted in. "He wouldn't," Kane said. "The barn's worth money. He murdered a boy for land. You think he cares about a barn?" Nora crawled to the door and looked out. Her heart sank. Garrett had lit a pile of hay near the barn entrance. The flames were already spreading to the dry wood of the wall. They had minutes, maybe less. Kane made a decision. The back exit. We go now. Fast, and we don't stop. He'll shoot us the second we're in the open. Better than burning alive. Kane grabbed her hand. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Get to the trees and keep going." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." She knew it was a lie. He was going to draw Garrett's fire, give her a chance to escape. "No!" She pulled her hand free. "We go together or not at all." Another shot punched through the barn. The horses were in full panic now, slamming against their stalls. Smoke filled the space, thick and choking. Kane looked at her, something fierce and desperate in his eyes. Then he kissed her, hard and fast, and tasting like goodbye. "Together then," he said. "On 3. He kicked open the back door. Smoke poured out. Through the haze, Nora could see Garrett on the cabin porch, rifle raised. 1. The flames roared behind them. 2. Kane's hand found hers, squeezed once. 3. They ran. Garrett fired. The bullet caught Kane high in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Nora screamed his name. Kane shoved her forward, toward the tree line. "Run!" She ran. Behind her, she heard Kane return fire, heard Garrett curse and take cover. She reached the trees and turned back. Kane was on his knees, blood spreading dark across his shirt. Garrett emerged from behind the water trough, rifle aimed at Kane's head, and Nora realized she had a choice to make. She could keep running, disappear into the forest, save herself, or she could go back. The decision took less than a heartbeat. She grabbed a fallen branch thick as her arm, and charged back into the firelight. Garrett turned at the sound of her footsteps, his face twisted with rage. "You stupid!" Nora swung the branch with everything she had. It connected with his rifle barrel, knocking his aim wide. The shot went wild into the dirt. Garrett backhanded her. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood. 3 years, he snarled, standing over her. 3 years I fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof, and this is how you repay me? He raised the rifle. Kane's gun barked once. Garrett staggered, dropping the rifle, clutching his side. But he didn't fall. He lunged for Nora instead, dragging her up by her hair. "You want her?" Garrett pulled a knife from his belt, pressing it to Nora's throat. "Come take her." Kane was on his feet, his left arm hanging useless, blood soaking his shirt. His gun was steady despite the wound. "Let her go, Garrett." "So you can shoot me? I don't think so." Garrett backed toward his horse, using Nora as a shield. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm riding out of here. You follow me, I cut her throat." "You're bleeding out," Kane said. "You won't make it a mile. Then I'll die knowing I took her with me." The knife pressed harder. Nora felt a sting, felt warmth trickle down her neck. Kane's expression went deadly calm. "You really want to die today?" "Better than hanging for that kid's murder." Garrett's laugh was bitter. "Yeah, I killed him. Little bastard wouldn't sell. Thought he was too good to make a deal." His grip on Nora tightened. Just like her. Too good for the man who saved her from starving. "Saved me?" Nora's voice came out raw. "You made me a prisoner. I made you a wife. You made me afraid to breathe." Something in her tone made Garrett pause. In that heartbeat of distraction, Nora remembered everything Kane had taught her in their brief time together. Survivors fight back. She drove her elbow into Garrett's wounded side. He howled, his grip loosening. She dropped her weight, breaking free, hitting the ground as Kane fired. The bullet caught Garrett in the chest. He stumbled backward, shock written across his face. The knife clattered to the dirt. "You were always weak," he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. His eyes found Nora. "That's why I picked you." Then he fell. Nora stayed on the ground, shaking, unable to move. Behind her, the barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the night sky. The heat was intense, pushing waves of scorching air across the yard. Kane limped to her side, his good hand reaching down. "Can you stand?" She took his hand. Let him pull her up. Garrett lay still in the dirt, his eyes staring at nothing. "Is he?" she started. "Yes." She should feel something. Grief, guilt, relief. Instead, she felt hollow. Kane swayed. She caught him before he fell. "You're losing too much blood." "I'll be fine." "You're not fine. We need to stop the bleeding." She looked around frantically. The cabin was untouched, but filled with Garrett's things, his presence. She couldn't go back in there. "The root cellar," she said. "Behind the house. There are supplies." She helped him walk, his weight heavy against her. Every step left bloody footprints in the dirt. By the time they reached the cellar, he was barely conscious. She got him down the stairs, laid him on the packed earth floor, tore strips from her dress to pack the wound. "Stay with me," she whispered, working quickly. "Don't you dare die on me now." His eyes found hers. Wouldn't dream of it. But his skin was cold, his breathing shallow. And Nora realized saving him might be beyond her skill. Nora had delivered a calf once, watched her father stitch a gash in a hired hand's leg. But digging a bullet out of a man's shoulder was different. Her hands shook as she heated her knife blade in the lamp. Flame. Kane watched through half-closed eyes, his face gray. "You don't have to do this," he said. Yes, I do. She knelt beside him. This is going to hurt. Already does. She poured whiskey over the wound. He gritted his teeth but didn't cry out. Then she started cutting, working by lamplight, trying to follow where the bullet had torn through muscle. Kane's hand found hers, squeezed hard enough to bruise. "Talk to me," he ground out. "Anything. Just talk." "I was 16 when my parents died," she said, her voice shaking as her fingers probed the wound. "Fever took them both in 3 days. I had nothing. The neighbors let me stay in their barn for a while, but they had 6 kids of their own." She found the bullet, worked it free. Kane's breathing went ragged. "I was picking through garbage behind the hotel when Garrett found me. He said he could give me a life. I thought he meant a good one." She pulled the bullet out, dropped it in the dirt. Blood welled fresh. She packed the wound with clean cloth, tied it tight. "You were surviving," Kane said through gritted teeth. "Can't fault you for that." I should have seen what he was. Men like Garrett hide what they are. That's how they hunt. His eyes focused on her face. "You see him clearly now. That's what matters." She finished bandaging, then collapsed beside him, exhausted. The cellar was cool and dark, insulated from the chaos above. She could still smell smoke, hear the distant crackle of the burning barn. "What happens now?" she asked. "We rest, then we figure it out. The law will come eventually. Someone will see the smoke, investigate. Let them come. I've got nothing to hide anymore." Kane's voice was getting stronger, the color returning to his face. "Garrett's dead. Daniel's avenged. The rest doesn't matter. What about me? I helped plan to kill you. You also saved my life." He turned his head to look at her. "I'd say we're even." They lay there in silence, listening to each other breathe. Above them, the barn collapsed with a roar of timber and sparks. "I don't have anything left," Nora said quietly. "No home, no money, nothing." "Neither do I." Kane's hand found hers in the darkness. "Spent 5 years chasing revenge. Didn't think past this moment." "What did you think would happen? After?" "Figured I'd be dead or in jail." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Didn't count on you. I'm not sure I'm worth counting on. You stood between me and a bullet. You're worth more than you know." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think she could be something other than what Garrett had made her. "We can't stay here," she said. "No." "Where do we go?" Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Somewhere new. Somewhere neither of us has ghosts. I don't know how to start over. Neither do I." He squeezed her hand. "But maybe we can figure it out together." Above them, the first light of dawn crept through the cellar door. The fire had burned itself out. The world was quiet except for the settling ruins. They had survived the night. What came next was anyone's guess. They buried Garrett at dawn in an unmarked grave beyond the property line. Nora didn't say words over him. Couldn't find any that didn't taste like lies. Kane leaned on the shovel, his wounded shoulder making the work slow. She'd offered to help dig, but he'd refused. "He was your husband," Kane said, packing the last of the dirt down. "Even if he was a bastard, that still means something. It means I was a fool. Means you tried to make the best of a bad situation." He tossed the shovel aside. "That's not foolish. That's survival." They walked back through the ruins. The barn was nothing but blackened timbers and ash. The cabin stood intact, but felt haunted by everything that had happened inside it. Nora forced herself to go in, to salvage what she could. Clothes, a few cooking supplies, the small amount of money Garrett had hidden under a floorboard. It came to $43, enough for a stage ticket maybe, a few weeks of food. She found Kane outside, studying the horizon with wary eyes. What is it? Nothing yet, but someone will come eventually. Smoke like that, visible for miles. He looked at her. We need to decide what we're going to tell them. The truth. The truth is complicated. You married to a murderer, me tracking him down for revenge, the two of us killing him together. Kane shook his head. Law might see it different than we do. Then what do we say? That Garrett was attacked by drifters. That you and I fought them off, but he died in the fire. His expression was grim. It's close enough to true. That's lying. That's staying alive. He caught her arm gently. Nora, if they start digging into this, they'll find out about Daniel, about the silver claim, about me spending 5 years tracking Garrett. They'll call it premeditated murder and hang us both. She knew he was right, but the thought of lying made her sick. She'd spent 3 years living Garrett's lies, becoming part of them. I don't want to build something new on a foundation of deception, she said. Then we don't build here. Kane gestured to the land around them. We take what we can carry and we leave. Start fresh somewhere. Nobody knows us. Run away. Move forward. His good hand cupped her face. There's a difference. She leaned into his touch, letting herself have this moment of comfort before reality crashed back in. They had so little. No horses. Garrett's had bolted during the fire, and Kane's was probably halfway to the next county by now. No supplies beyond what they could carry. No destination. But they had each other. And for the first time in 3 years, Nora felt something other than fear. Where do we go? She asked. California, maybe. Oregon. Somewhere land is cheap and questions are scarce. Kane pulled her close, careful of his wounded shoulder. Somewhere we can disappear. And if someone finds us, if the law comes looking, then we deal with it together. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think they could simply walk away from the blood and ash and start over clean. But as the sun rose higher, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of orange and gold, she saw riders in the distance, 3 of them, coming fast from town. Kane, she said quietly. He'd already seen them. His jaw tightened. Get inside. Pack what you can. We've got maybe 10 minutes. They didn't have 10 minutes. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. The man in front wore a tin star pinned to his vest. Sheriff Rollins, older than Nora remembered, with a face like sun-dried leather. Behind him rode 2 deputies, young and nervous, hands near their guns. Kane stepped forward, positioning himself between Nora and the law. His wounded arm hung stiff at his side, but his right hand was free and ready. Sheriff, he said evenly. Rollins studied the scene with careful eyes. The burned barn, the ash-covered yard, Kane's blood-stained shirt, Nora standing pale and hollow-eyed behind him. Saw the smoke from town. Came to investigate. His gaze settled on Nora. Mrs. Calloway, where's your husband? Dead, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. How? Kane answered before she could. Drifters. 3 of them showed up yesterday asking for food. When Garrett refused, they got violent. It was the story they'd agreed on. Simple. Clean. Almost believable. Rollins didn't look convinced. 3 men, you say? Where are they now? Dead or run off. Hard to tell in the chaos. Kane gestured to his shoulder. One of them got me before we drove them off. By then the barn was burning, and Garrett was... I'd like to hear from Mrs. Calloway. The sheriff's eyes were sharp. Ma'am, is that what happened? Nora felt the weight of the lie pressing down on her. One word could condemn them both. One truth could set them free or send them to the gallows. She looked at Kane, saw the tension in his jaw, the acceptance in his eyes. He wouldn't blame her if she told the truth, wouldn't fight it. But she thought about Daniel, 17 and murdered for land, about Garrett's hands on her, his fists, his cruelty disguised as love, about Kane, who'd ridden into hell for justice and found her instead. "That's what happened," she said. Rollins dismounted slowly. "Mind if I look around?" "Be my guest," Kane said. The sheriff walked the property, his deputies trailing behind. They found Garrett's body in the cabin where Kane had dragged it before dawn, made to look like he'd died trying to save his possessions from the fire. They found shell casings, blood in the dirt, evidence of a fight. But they also found something Nora had forgotten. Rollins emerged from the cabin holding Garrett's ledger, the one he'd kept hidden under the floorboards, the one with names and numbers and transactions that proved he'd been involved in things, darker than land deals. The sheriff's expression was unreadable as he flipped through pages. "Your husband kept interesting records, Mrs. Calloway." He looked up. "Lot of names here, some I recognize. Territory judge, a few businessmen, couple politicians." A pause. "All of them bought land from Garrett at prices that don't make sense, unless those purchases were covering something else." Nora's throat went dry. "I don't know anything about his business." "I believe you." Rollins closed the book. "But I'm curious about this entry from 5 years ago. Sale of mining claim near Red Creek to Garrett Calloway. Seller listed as Daniel Kane." Kane went very still. "That your brother?" Rollins asked quietly. The moment stretched taut as wire. One wrong word would unravel everything. Then Rollins did something unexpected. He tossed the ledger into the smoking ruins of the barn. "Shame about this fire," the sheriff said. "Destroyed everything. Records, evidence, all of it." He looked at Kane. "Your brother deserved better than what he got." Kane's voice was rough. "Yes, sir, he did. Justice has a way of working itself out, even when the law can't reach." Rollins swung back onto his horse. "You folks planning to stay on this property?" "No," Nora said. "Too many bad memories." "Smart choice." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Safe travels, wherever you're headed." He rode away, his deputies following, leaving Nora and Kane standing in the ruins. They left at dawn the next day, everything they owned tied to a mule. Kane had bought from a neighboring ranch. Nora didn't look back as they crossed the property line. There was nothing behind her worth remembering. The ride west took 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, Kane's shoulder healing, Nora learning to breathe without fear. At night they camped under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt, and Kane told her stories about Daniel, about the brother who'd loved books and hated violence, who'd died too young for land that meant nothing. "He would have liked you," Kane said one night, firelight catching in his eyes. "How do you know?" "Because you're brave. And Daniel always said the bravest thing a person could do was choose kindness in a world that rewards cruelty." She wasn't sure she was kind, but she was trying to be something other than what Garrett had made her. They reached Oregon Territory in late autumn, found a valley where the land was cheap and the soil was good, and nobody asked questions about the past. Kane built them a cabin with his own hands, working slow and careful, making it strong. Nora planted a garden, learned to can and preserve, discovered she was good at making things grow. In the evenings, they sat on the porch Kane had built, watching the sun set over mountains that had never heard of Red Creek Valley or Garrett Calloway or the woman she used to be. "You happy?" Kane asked one night, his hand finding hers. She thought about it. Happiness felt like too big a word for what she felt. But there was peace here. Safety. The freedom to wake up without fear. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." He kissed her then, gentle and unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. The following spring, a letter arrived. Sheriff Rollins, writing to inform them that Garrett's estate had been settled. The land had been sold to pay his debts, but there was money left over, $300, sent in Nora's name. She used it to buy chickens and a milk cow and seeds for expanding the garden, kept $50 back, and sent it anonymously to the school in the town where Daniel had dreamed of studying law. Kane found her crying over the letter from the school, thanking them for their donation. "He would have been proud of you," she said, her voice thick. "Of us," Kane corrected, pulling her close. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the cabin they'd built from nothing, on land they'd paid for honestly, in a life neither of them had imagined possible. Nora Calloway had dared a dangerous man to come inside her home, planning to help murder him. Instead, she'd saved them both. And in the mountains of Oregon, far from the ghosts of Wyoming, two broken people learned what it meant to be whole. If this story moved you, or if you've ever had to make an impossible choice between loyalty and truth, then do something for me. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. You don't want to miss tomorrow's story. See you tomorrow.